My boss smirked at the client and said, "Ignore her. She's just an intern who makes coffee." Then he took my chair. I didn't argue. I didn't fight back. I walked out. 10 minutes later, the client slammed the table and said, "Bring her back. She's the only reason we're even here." And in that moment, my boss realized he had just thrown out the person controlling his entire deal. My name is Isabella Hayes. I'm 25, 5'6", with dark chestnut hair I usually keep tied low at the nape of my neck. People say I look calm, even when I'm not. It helps. Calm makes people underestimate you. That was the point. Because at Hayes & Co., no one was supposed to recognize me. I didn't walk in as the chairman's daughter. I walked in as an intern. No last name advantage, no introductions, no special treatment. Just a badge that said, Isabella H., Intern. The office was exactly what you'd expect. Glass walls, polished floors, people moving fast, like urgency meant importance. But it only took me a few hours to see what my father couldn't from the top floor. Something was off. Mark Dalton was the first problem. Early 40s, tall, broad shoulders, always in tailored suits that were just a little too sharp, like he was trying to prove something. His smile came easy, but it never felt genuine. There was a story behind that. I found out later, he'd been pushed out of his last company after a failed deal. Not publicly, quietly. Here, he was rebuilding his reputation, at any cost. "You're the new intern?" he asked on my first morning, barely glancing up from his phone. "Yes." He nodded toward the far end of the office. "Coffee machine's acting up again. Figure it out." No orientation, no welcome, just instructions. I didn't correct him. I didn't tell him who I was. I just nodded. Of course. That became my role. Not strategy, not analysis, not even support, just invisible. I made coffee, printed documents, organized meeting rooms no one thanked me for. And I watched, because that's why I was here. 2 days in, I met Claire Benson, late 20s. Slim, blonde hair tucked behind her ears, always dressed simply. She spoke softly, like she didn't want to be noticed, but her eyes were sharp. She saw everything. "You don't have to do all that," she whispered once, watching me carry a stack of folders. I smiled. "I know," she hesitated. "Then why are you?" I didn't answer, not yet. By the end of the week, I understood the structure. Mark didn't lead, he controlled. He interrupted people, redirected credit, dismissed ideas before they could be fully explained. And the worst part? No one challenged him. Not because they agreed, because they had learned not to. That's how culture breaks, not all at once, piece by piece. That night, I sat in my apartment reviewing notes. Not just tasks, behavior, patterns, gaps. My father had told me one thing before I started. Don't fix anything yet. Understand why it's broken first. So I didn't intervene, even when I could. Because this wasn't about proving I was capable. It was about understanding who wasn't. On Friday afternoon, I saw the email. Subject line, client meeting, Monday high priority. Big deal. Mark walked past my desk, tapping the printed agenda against his hand. "This one matters," he said to no one in particular. Then his eyes flicked to me. "Stay out of the way on Monday." I nodded. Of course. He had no idea, and that was exactly why this was going to work.
By Monday morning, I wasn't invisible anymore. Mark had noticed me, and somehow that made everything worse. "Isabella," he said my name like it was a mistake he had to tolerate. I looked up. "Yes?" He didn't look at me right away. He was scrolling through his phone, jaw tight, like something had already annoyed him. "Conference room B isn't ready. Fix it." I had never been told to prepare it, but that didn't matter. "Of course," I said, standing up immediately. That was the beginning. From that moment on, I wasn't just an intern. I was his intern. Coffee orders, printed reports, last-minute fixes that somehow always became my responsibility. And every time, he made sure it happened in front of everyone. Isabella, how hard is it to follow instructions? Isabella, do I need to explain basic things to you? Isabella, we don't have time to babysit. His voice never rose. It didn't need to. The tone did all the work. People heard it. People saw it. And then, they looked away. That was the system. Later that afternoon, I sat quietly at my desk while the team gathered for a strategy discussion. I wasn't invited. I never was. But I could hear everything. Timeline's tight, someone said. Then tighten it, Mark replied. We don't slow down for problems. That told me everything I needed to know. He didn't solve problems, he pushed past them. That's how things break. After the meeting, I ran into Claire again. She was holding a stack of files, but her attention was on me. You shouldn't let him talk to you like that, she said quietly. I tilted my head slightly. Why? She blinked, caught off guard. Because it's not right. I held her gaze for a moment. And what happens if I say something? She didn't answer, because she already knew. Nothing. That night, I reviewed everything again, not just what he said, but how people reacted. No one challenged him. No one corrected him. No one even questioned him, because they had learned not to. The next morning, I met someone new. Ethan Brooks, early 40s, medium build, slightly unshaven, always adjusting his glasses like he needed a moment to think before speaking. Senior analyst. He approached my desk hesitantly. You handled yesterday, well, he said. I looked up. Did I? He gave a small, uncertain smile. Most people wouldn't stay that calm. I shrugged. It's just work. He studied me for a second longer than necessary, like he was trying to figure something out. You're not what you seem, he said quietly. I smiled. Neither is anyone else. He didn't respond, but he didn't walk away immediately either. That was interesting. Back at the team meeting later that day, Mark was presenting again. Confident, sharp, untouchable. And every time someone hesitated, he filled the silence. Every time someone started to speak, he redirected. Control, not leadership. I wrote it down, because patterns matter. And Mark had one. The more I watched him, the clearer it became. He didn't ignore me because I was insignificant. He ignored me because I was convenient. Someone he could control. Someone who wouldn't push back. And in a system like this, that's exactly who gets used. I closed my notebook. He still didn't see me. And that was his biggest mistake. Mark thought the deal started on Monday. He was wrong. It started 3 weeks earlier. Not in a conference room, not through official channels, but through a single email. I had sent it late at night from my personal account. No company signature, no title, no authority, just a name. Isabella Hayes. And a proposal. The client was Anderson Logistics Group, one of the largest distribution networks on the East Coast. Complex, demanding, known for walking away from deals that didn't meet their exact operational standards. Most companies approach them with presentations. I didn't. I approached them with questions. That's what got their attention. The first response came from Daniel Reed, their director of operations. Mid-40s, tall, lean, close-cropped hair, the kind of face that didn't waste expressions. Direct, efficient, the type of man who respected clarity over charm. His reply was short. Interesting approach. Let's talk. We talked. Not about pricing, not about timelines, about problems. Their biggest issue wasn't cost. It was inconsistency, delayed responses, disconnected departments, systems that didn't communicate properly. I listened, took notes, asked more questions, and slowly, the conversation shifted from vendor to solution. Over the next 2 weeks, I mapped everything. Their workflow, their bottlenecks, their expectations, and then I built a structure around it. Not perfect, but precise. By the time Mark even heard about the deal, I already knew what Anderson needed. Back at the office, things looked very different. Mark walked into meetings with confidence, slides prepared, numbers polished. He believed he was leading the negotiation. He wasn't. He was presenting a version of a deal that had already taken shape. He just didn't know where it came from. One afternoon, I was reviewing my notes when I felt someone standing behind me. I turned. It was Lucas Grant, late 30s, slightly taller than average, thin build, messy brown hair, always wearing headphones around his neck. IT specialist. Quiet, observant, the kind of person who noticed things others ignored. "You're not using the company server," he said. Not a question, a statement. I met his eyes. "No." He tilted his head slightly. "Most interns don't have external communication like that," he added. I didn't answer immediately. Then, "Most interns don't ask the right questions either," I said. He studied me for a second longer. Not suspicious, curious. Then he nodded once. "Just be careful," he said, and walked away. That was interesting. He hadn't reported it. He hadn't pushed further, which meant one thing. He wasn't part of the system. Back at my desk, I opened the latest message from Daniel Reed. "Looking forward to the meeting Monday. Let's finalize." I read it twice, then closed the tab, because by now, everything was already in place. Mark was preparing for a deal he thought he controlled. The company was expecting a standard negotiation. Anderson was walking in with expectations no one here understood, except me. And I still said nothing. Monday arrived earlier than expected, not because of the clock, but because of the weight behind it. The office felt different that morning, quieter, tighter, like everyone knew something important was about to happen, even if they didn't understand what. I was already at my desk when Mark walked in. Perfect suit, confident stride, that same controlled expression he wore when he thought he was about to win. "Conference room A," he said, tossing a folder onto my desk without slowing down. "Make sure everything's ready. This one matters." I looked at the folder. Anderson Logistics, of course. "Understood," I replied calmly. I prepared the room myself. Water aligned, screens tested, documents placed exactly where they needed to be. Details matter, especially when no one else is paying attention to them. At 9 a.m. sharp, the clients arrived. Daniel Reed stepped in first. Same sharp presence, same unreadable expression. Behind him was Megan Carter, early 30s, tall, poised, dark hair pulled into a clean bun, eyes that moved quickly, taking in everything without saying much. Senior operations strategist, analytical, precise. She scanned the room once, then paused. Her eyes landed on me, just for a second, but that was enough. Recognition doesn't always show in expressions. Sometimes it's in hesitation. Mark stepped forward immediately, extending his hand. "Daniel, welcome. We've prepared everything for today." Daniel nodded once, but his attention drifted again, toward me. Mark noticed, and that's when he made his mistake. He followed Daniel's gaze, then gave a short, dismissive smile. "Oh, ignore her," he said casually. "She's just an intern, handles coffee and setup." Silence. Not loud, not dramatic, but it changed something. I didn't react, didn't correct him. I simply stepped back, invisible again. "Isabella," Mark added, not even looking at me this time. "You can step out, we don't need distractions." "Of course," I nodded. "Understood." I picked up my notebook, walked toward the door. No one stopped me, not Claire. She was sitting near the end of the table, hands folded too tightly, eyes fixed on the surface in front of her. She had seen everything, but like before, she said nothing. That was the system. I stepped out into the hallway, closed the door quietly behind me, and leaned against the wall for just a second. Inside, the meeting had already started, voices low, controlled. But something was off. I could hear it. Not in the words, in the rhythm. Too many pauses, too many explanations. Mark was talking, but he wasn't answering. That doesn't work with people like Daniel Reed. They don't listen to what you say. They listen to what you don't know. Across the hall, I saw someone approaching. Sofia Alvarez, mid-40s, HR director. Sharp posture, dark blazer, calm expression that never fully revealed what she was thinking. She stopped when she saw me outside. "Not in the meeting?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not needed." She glanced at the door, then back at me. Interesting, she said. That was all, but her tone said more. HR always knows when something is off. They just don't act until it's too late. I checked my phone. One unread message from Daniel Reed. Is everything all right on your side? I stared at it for a moment, then locked the screen. Inside the room, voices were rising slightly now, pressure building. Mark still didn't understand, but he would, soon. From the hallway, I could hear it unravel. Not loudly, but clearly. Mark's voice carried through the glass, confident at first, measured, controlled. But then, something shifted. A pause too long, a response that didn't quite match the question. That's how it starts. I stepped closer to the door just enough to catch the tone, not the words, the rhythm. Inside, Mark was presenting. Based on your projected growth, we've optimized the distribution timeline to maximize throughput efficiency. That's not our primary concern. Daniel Reed's voice cut through, calm but firm. Silence followed. Not empty, heavy. Mark adjusted quickly. Of course, and that's why we've structured the system to allow flexible scaling. We're not scaling, Daniel said. Another pause. This one longer. Mark didn't understand. He was answering questions the client wasn't asking. That's worse than having no answer at all. Inside the room, I imagined the expressions. Daniel still, observing, measuring. Megan Carter, leaning slightly forward, her eyes narrowing just enough to signal something wasn't right. She wasn't reacting emotionally. She was analyzing. And Mark. He was still talking, filling the silence, trying to regain control. That never works. A few feet away, someone stepped out of the room. Jonathan Price, early 50s, solid build, slightly graying hair, always carrying himself like he had seen too many deals go wrong to be impressed easily. Senior director. He didn't notice me at first, just rubbed his temple like he was processing something. Then he looked at me. Is this how your team usually runs client meetings? He asked. His tone wasn't aggressive, just disappointed. I met his gaze. I wouldn't know, I said calmly. I'm just the intern. He studied me for a second longer than necessary, like he didn't fully believe that. Then he nodded slowly and went back inside. A minute later, the tone shifted again, sharper now. Daniel's voice more direct this time. You mentioned integration across departments. Can you explain how your system handles delayed data synchronization? That question mattered. Mark didn't have the answer. I knew that, because he had removed that part of the structure to make the timeline look cleaner. Inside, I heard movement, papers shifting, a chair adjusting. Then, well, the system is designed to... That's not what I asked. Silence. Real silence this time. No recovery, no redirection, just exposure. Down the hall, Claire appeared. She stopped when she saw me outside the room. Her expression was tight, uneasy. It's not going well, she said quietly. I nodded. I know. She hesitated. You should be in there. I looked at the door, then back at her. Would it change anything? I asked. She didn't answer, because she already knew. Inside, voices were rising slightly now, not loud, but tense. Daniel again. We need clarity before moving forward. That was it. The line that determines everything. No clarity, no deal. Claire shifted beside me. They're going to lose this, she whispered. I didn't respond, because the deal wasn't failing. It was revealing. And inside that room, Mark still thought he could fix it. He couldn't. Not anymore. The moment didn't explode. It stopped. Inside the room, the tension had already peaked. Voices tight. Answers incomplete. Mark was still trying, still talking, still filling the silence with words that didn't solve anything. Then, a chair shifted, and Daniel Reed spoke. Let's pause. Not loud, not aggressive. Final. Everything stopped. No one moved, no one spoke. Even from outside, I could feel it. That shift. The one you don't come back from. Inside, papers rustled softly. Someone exhaled. Then Daniel's voice again, calm, precise. Before we go any further, he said, I need clarification on something. Mark straightened. Finally, something he could respond to. Of course, he said quickly. What would you like to clarify? A beat, then, where is Isabella? Silence, not confusion, shock. Mark blinked, just once. I'm sorry, he said. Daniel didn't repeat himself. Isabella Hayes, he said. She's the one we've been speaking with. Across the table, Megan Carter leaned forward slightly. Her eyes were sharper now, focused. Yes, she added. We were expecting her in this meeting. That was it. Everything shifted. From outside, I heard the change immediately. Chairs moving, voices dropping. Mark's tone, different now. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he said. She's just an intern. She handles... No, Daniel cut him off, firm. She handled the deal. Silence again, but heavier. Inside the hallway, Claire stepped closer to me, her face pale. They're asking for you, she whispered. I didn't respond immediately, because this moment had to land. Not rushed, not forced, earned. Behind us, footsteps approached. Victor Lang, early 50s, tall, composed, sharp posture, senior executive. The kind of man who didn't intervene unless something had already gone very wrong. He looked from Claire to me, then to the door. They're waiting, he said simply. Not a question, a recognition. At the same time, my phone vibrated. One new notification, from Lucas in IT. External email logs flagged. You might want to see this. Of course, the system had caught up. Claire looked at me again, this time, not uncertain, certain. You should go in, she said. I met her eyes. Now you're sure? She nodded. I am. That mattered. Inside the room, voices were quieter now, controlled, but no longer confident. Mark was speaking again, trying to regain structure, trying to explain something he didn't understand. He was already losing. I reached for the door, paused for just a second, then opened it. Every head turned, not slowly, immediately. Recognition, confusion, realization, all at once. I stepped inside, and for the first time, no one saw me as invisible. When I stepped into the room, the silence didn't break. It deepened. Every eye was on me. Not as an intern, not anymore. Daniel Reed didn't hesitate. He stood up slightly from his chair, just enough to close the distance between us. Isabella, he said, voice steady, I assume you're ready to continue? Not a question, an acknowledgement. I nodded once. I am. Mark laughed, too quickly, too loudly. This is unnecessary, he said, turning toward the table. She doesn't have the authority to... She has all the context, Megan interrupted calmly. That stopped him. I stepped forward, placed my notebook on the table. Not a presentation, not slides, just facts. 3 weeks ago, I began, Anderson Logistics reached out regarding inconsistency in cross-department coordination. Mark froze. I didn't look at him. They weren't looking for cost reduction, I continued. They were trying to fix operational breakdowns caused by delayed data synchronization. Daniel nodded slightly. Correct, he said. I flipped the page. The initial structure addressed that through phased validation checkpoints, I added. But those were removed in the final version presented today. Now I looked at Mark. This version, I said calmly, doesn't solve their problem. The room shifted, not dramatically, but enough. Daniel leaned back, watching. Everything she said aligns with our discussions, he confirmed. That was it, the confirmation. Mark tried to recover. We refined the model as a team. No, Claire said. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. Everyone turned. I saw it, she continued. The original version. It was hers. Mark's composure cracked. That's not how this works, he snapped. I tilted my head slightly. No, I said. That's exactly how it works. Silence. Heavy now. Across the table, Victor Lang leaned forward, his eyes fixed on me. Continue, he said. So I did. I walked them through everything. The initial contact, the problem, the structure, the decisions. Not emotionally, not defensively, just clearly. By the time I finished, There was nothing left to question. Mark didn't speak, because there was nothing he could say. And then, I turned toward the head of the table. My father was already watching. He hadn't interrupted once, hadn't reacted, but I knew. He had known. At least part of it. I think that covers the operational side, I said calmly. Then I added, and for clarity, I paused. Not for effect, for precision. My name is Isabella Hayes. A beat. Then, daughter of the chairman. Silence didn't fall. It collapsed. Mark's face drained. Victor didn't move. Claire closed her eyes briefly. And Daniel, he just nodded. Like everything had finally made sense. No one spoke for a full 3 seconds. It doesn't sound long, but in a boardroom, it's everything. Mark broke first. This is ridiculous, he said, voice tight, forcing control that was already gone. You can't just... You're done, Mark. The voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. My father had finally spoken. Richard Hayes, mid-50s, tall, composed, silver streaks at the temples. The kind of presence that doesn't demand attention, it commands it. He had built this company from nothing, and more importantly, he knew exactly when something inside it started to rot. He didn't look at Mark, not at first. Effective immediately, he continued calmly, you are relieved of your responsibilities. That was it. No argument, no discussion. Mark looked around the room, for support, for hesitation, for anything. There was none. Victor Lang didn't move. Daniel Reed watched quietly. Claire stared at the table. And Mark... He realized. Too late. Security didn't need to be called. He walked out on his own. The door closed behind him, and just like that, the room reset. My father finally turned to me. Isabella, he said, not as a father, as a leader. Continue. I nodded once, then stepped forward. The same room, the same deal, but now, different control. I turned to Daniel. Let's start where we should have, I said calmly. Operational consistency. Megan leaned forward immediately, focused again. I walked them through the corrected structure. Phased validation checkpoints, cross-department synchronization, clear escalation paths. Not theory, execution. Daniel didn't interrupt, because now, there was nothing to interrupt. By the end of it, he closed his notebook. We can proceed, he said simply. That was the deal, not signed, but secured. After the clients left, the room didn't empty. It shifted. Victor approached me first. Impressive, he said. You saw what others ignored. I nodded slightly. They weren't looking, I replied. Across the room, Claire hesitated before walking toward me. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I should have said something earlier. I met her eyes. You did, I said. Today. That was enough. Because silence, when broken, matters. Later that afternoon, I was introduced properly. Not as an intern, but as Isabella Hayes, Director of Strategic Operations. The title didn't matter. The responsibility did. My first decision was simple. Claire stayed. So did Ethan. And Lucas. Not because they were perfect, because they paid attention. And that's where change begins. The second decision, transparency. No more closed-door decisions without accountability. No more silencing voices to maintain control. Because control, without clarity, breaks systems. I had seen that firsthand, and I wasn't going to let it happen again. I could have told them who I was on day one. I could have stopped everything before it even began. But I didn't. Because sometimes, the truth isn't something you say, it's something you let people reveal about themselves. So tell me, if you were me, would you speak up immediately, or stay silent and watch everything unfold? Would you forgive someone like Mark, or make sure they never get that chance again? And more importantly, do you think people deserve a second chance, or just the consequences they earned? Let me know what you would do. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me for more stories that will make you question everything.